Hi everybody, and welcome to the English Labs video. This week we are focusing on argument analysis and looking ahead to the exam, and particularly looking at section C from 2019. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to take a look at this piece from Haley Astaire, The Better, Faster Shopping Experience, and we're going to take a look at all the different ways that we can approach it. And so if you're watching this video, our hope is that you have already looked at our first three videos about argument analysis. They were general videos that looked at how we can approach this skill, and there are three separate videos, and they are about making sure that everybody from every skill range is taken care of and has something that they can really be working towards. And so the first of those are for those students that are just looking to get the nuts and bolts out of every single article. The second one is about students writing really good, consistent pieces. And the third one is for those students who are looking to find the tiny little things, the subtle little arguments and so on, to get them to the very top when it comes to doing well on the exam for section C. And so my advice is that you go ahead and watch those before you watch any of these videos where we take a look at the specific material, because we have structured today's video in a manner where we are going to be moving through the piece, starting at these sort of nuts and bolts ideas and the fundamentals of the things that we want to be able to see in the section C. Then the middle part of the video is going to be looking at okay, how are we going to write a really good piece looking at this when we take a look at all of the evidence that's here. And then finally, we're going to look at those habits of the very best scoring pieces and taking a look at what they would be able to find out of it. And so we'll include some timestamps in the comments if you feel like you are beyond that sort of nuts and bolts sort of area. But my advice would be to watch a couple of the sections, and I would be, being really clear with you if I said to you that, watching the whole thing would be useful as well, because it's a way of us moving through the article. We'll go back and forth many times, but essentially as the video goes, we're going to get more complex with what we're finding with our analysis. Of course, like always, put your comments and questions down there in the comments, and we'll aim to get to them as quickly as possible to help you out, and we'd really like to hear your feedback with how you're going. But let's just jump straight in. And so the first thing that we're going to be looking for are those nuts and bolts, those foundations of argument analysis, and really those things that we can see in this piece that we could be pretty confident we're going to be able to see in other pieces that are going to show up on the end of year exam when it comes to section C. And so the two things that we really want to be looking at here that we know we're always going to be able to analyze, because there's always going to be material there, is the writer and the audience. And so when we take a look at this piece, we've got Haley Astaire, and we have Astaire's local supermarket, Haley's local store, I should say, and we have the way in which she portrays herself to the reader. And so one of the first examples we see of Astaire pointing herself out in a certain way is when she mentions that, she's in her store every day, and that she knows her customers and that they don't pay cash for their goods now. And so we could jump on that whenever we see that word I, because we're going to be looking at, okay, the writer, the presenter, the speaker, whoever it might be on the exam, is portraying themselves in a certain way, and that's always going to have an impact on how they want the reader to think or to act or to feel. And so when we take a look at this first line here that we've just highlighted, I'm in our store every day, the fact that she's mentioning that brings about that sense of trust. It portrays her as this hard-working person to these locals that are reading this advertorial, which it is in the in this local paper. And so there's this idea of her being, hard-working, this idea that it's for them and that she understands the issue. She understands what's going on when it comes to cashless payments and so on, because this is something that happens in her life every single day. So there's that sense of credibility, that sense of trust that is beginning to build, or that she is aiming to build with her reader, based on the fact that she is there every day. She's hardworking, she's reliable, she's credible, she understands the situation, and she's there to help them out. Of course, it then moves on to, or should I say earlier before that, it actually has this idea of it being the local store. And that's mentioned a bunch of times, that she is there for them, that she is, that this is Haley, she is the person, this is Haley's local store, and that she is there and she is doing these things because you told us that was what you wanted and what you needed. And so this relationship between the writer and the reader is really being established there in that opening paragraph that we've just highlighted. But we need to be talking about more than the fact that they make a connection, because it's about the fact of why she would make that connection and how that's going to help her persuade her audience. And so this idea of the fact that you told us that was what you needed, the idea is that the audience feels that this is for them, that this is something that Esther has done for them and that she is there to serve them. And so Esther is portraying herself not just as this hardworking, credible person and so on, but further to that, she's also portraying herself as being a servant to these people, that she is there to help them, to assist them, that she is there to make their lives easier. And of course, we see that later on when we have this idea of, of it being a breeze and so on that comes out later on. So we can see that when further on she says, we have always tried to be a leader in the community. And so there's just another way that she has portrayed herself. And so, of course, the other rhythm that we want you to get into when you're looking at these pieces is that if you're looking to find things to analyse about how the writer portrays himself, that you don't just stop at one thing. There are many times and many different places that they're going to point these things out. And so she mentions that, you'll breeze through the checkout. And so she's making it very clear that she is there for these people, that she is a part of the community, and on top of that, she is a leader within the community. And so therefore, these people are going to be better off working with her and what she is going to be able to do to them. And so, do for them. And so in summary, when we're taking a look at Esther and how she portrays herself here, there's these ideas of her being hardworking, credible, reliable, understanding of the issue, a leader when it comes to these types of things, someone who is a part of the community, someone who is looking out for the rest of the community. And so the ways that can be used in order to persuade an audience of local readers is that they are going to feel supported. They're going to feel like she's looking out for them. They're going to feel assured. They're going to feel that that she is a leader, that she has always known what's best, and that this is just yet another change. And so the beauty of this piece, and as you look through some of the other exams from previous years, you may notice that this one has a reply and other pieces do. And so all that means for us is that we just have further ammunition, more things to work with when it comes to analysing language. And so we have Samuel Morricone here. And so Morricone begins early on by saying, who is she kidding? And so there's this idea of him being a leader in his own right, in that he is going to be the voice of this community, that he's going to be the one to stand up, that he is going to have the courage to be able to point these things out. And so that sense of anger gives him a sense of righteousness, and that gives him that sense of leadership amongst the community, that he's going to be the one to stand up and really point out the flaws in this system. Of course, he goes on to elicit a little bit of sympathy later on as well, when he mentions, his mother in her 80s in this section here. And so rather than just pointing out, okay, it draws sympathy from the reader, we need to be talking about the fact that he is perhaps being the voice of the community here, that he is talking for the people who are most vulnerable in the community, and that he's been, as I said before, a leader in his own right. And so this frustration that comes about, ends up here with this piece where he's talking about the store being the ones who are going to benefit. And through that, Morricone is able to present himself as being, wise. There's this sense of wisdom that he understands the true motivations behind Haley Esther and what she's trying to do here. That really, as much as she tries to, fluff it up by saying that it's for everybody else, it's really for her to make more money. And so we could talk about the fact that that is cynical, and that he is aiming to create a sense of mistrust. But we could also go further when we're talking about the way in which he presents himself, in that he is wise to see the true motivations here, and that he is being a voice of the people to look out for other people, and that really he's looking out for the community's best intentions. And so, as we mentioned in the nuts and bolts video, the writer and the reader, or who the audience are and how that language is going to affect them, is a habit that you should be looking to get into, really get into the foundations of argument analysis. Because no matter what's going to be there when it comes to exam day, you can be sure that there's going to be things that you can analyze when it comes to the reader, when it comes to the audience, and when it comes to those three words, think, act, feel. And so you'll notice that through everything that I've highlighted today, it's all come back to how that's going to lead the audience to think or to act or to feel. Are they going to feel assured? Are they going to see and feel that Morricone is a leader, or that Astaire has their best interests at heart? And so when we're looking to take our first steps into this analysis, we really want to make sure that what we're doing is that we're walking into the reader, the writer, who that reader is when it comes to the audience, and then every time we find some evidence about those things, we bring it back to how that language is going to lead the reader to think or act or feel. And so we move on to the second part of today's video, where we're going to be looking at the things that people should be doing if they're looking to write those consistently good argument analysis pieces. And so those first few things we want to think about are the idea of tone and the shifts in argument. Of course, with the move a few years ago in the study design towards it being argument analysis, we need to make sure if we want to be writing a piece that is, consistently up there amongst one of the good, solid pieces, that we can show the shifts in argument and the shifts in tone and where these arguments change and so on. And so this is going to be different for every student that looks at it, and I need you to be okay with that. What I'm going to point out to you today is how I saw some of the shifts, but I don't want you thinking that teachers or examiners or people who make YouTube videos are the ones who know where the arguments are. There's a range of arguments, there's a range of approaches, there's a range of tactics that these writers will take, and that if you can show where they change and the different manners and the different ways in which they try to influence people, then you'll be fine. It's not a case of there being like 7 arguments in the one piece, and that if you don't find all 7, or if you don't find the right ones, you're not doing the job. Just get yourself in the habit of finding where these things shift and where these things happen, and you'll be definitely on the right path. Okay, so we start with this idea of tone, and the thing that I want you thinking about with tone is that a lot of times students think that they can just identify the tone or a tone, and then it's like, tick, the job's done, because they've identified. They might have, chosen a word from a list that they knew, and, tick, it's done. Astaire speaks in a welcoming tone, and so therefore it's done. We need to make sure that we're analysing the use of tone, that we're not just identifying it. And so when it comes to this, we're talking about the fact that we have the opening where it says our valued customers. And so there is that sense of it being welcoming. There is that sense of there being a spirit of goodwill that exists between Hayley Astaire and her customers. And so we need to analyse why she would do that. Why would she want to be welcoming, and why would she want to make herself seem as if she's there for them and for these people? And so as we can further see, as you know, Hayley's local store is not your average grocery store. We always put our customers first. And so we can analyse this tone further to be talking about the fact that it's welcoming, but more than that, that it is outlining the fact that the customer is someone who is valued greatly here, and that, that they are going to be embraced, and that the store is there to help them. And so it also brings out this caring side, and the fact that she mentions that it is Hayley's local store and that she is writing this for locals. The idea is that they are going to get an experience that is for them, and something that is going to embrace them as an individual, and not something that the other bigger stores might be able to work with, because they are so much bigger and not just involved in the community in the way that Hayley is. And so we want to be able to make sure that we're going with that to the point where we're really understanding the fact that we can analyze the tone and not just identify it. Of course, there are a few shifts in the tone where she talks about the Australians embracing the digital economy, where she actually really gets down to brass tacks, and she's sort of saying to her people, look, I'm here for you, but now I'm going to shift towards the fact that this is what everybody's doing. We have these statistics, and rather than just pointing out the fact that we understand that she's used statistics, we want to talk about the fact that what those statistics are saying is that, whilst a decade ago people weren't really up with this, now people use cards to buy a cup of coffee. And so there's this subtle shift in her tone there towards the idea of, look, I'm here for you and we're here to make your shopping experience better, but there's a subtle little point of, you really should be doing this already. Most people are already doing this. Australians have embraced it, and therefore you should too. Of course, when it talks about, why is the store becoming cashless now? We have this other shift and this shift in argument in terms of, well, why make the change and why do we have to make the change? And she makes sure that it's made clear that it's about the customer again. And so she comes back to this idea of it being about the customer. We've put together a visual that will show up on the screen that you can take a screenshot of and you can take a look at. And the reason that we've done it in this circular sort of way is so that you can see the manner in which an argument can be fluid and that tone can be fluid and that it can move around. And as I said, this isn't the answer by any stretch, but it's showing you the way in which Astaire moves from excitement about, hey, this is exciting and this is here, to then this point of, look, we don't want to leave anybody out, to then also that subtle nod towards, but if you're not up to date with this yet, you really should be, and then back to that excitement again of saying, look, this is for you and this is all for you. So have a look at that and have a look at the quotes that we've thrown in there as well to signify where those changes happen, because often that can be a really great way for you to obviously not just use the evidence there, but when you can signify those things in your piece, you can use that evidence in a way where you're outlining those things in your paragraph so that you're showing, I understand where these arguments shift and where they go to. And so when it comes to Morricone, there's some tone words that we could throw at it, like cynical, angry, frustrated, mistrusting, all these types of things. But I'd be mentioning why or how he's used these things and then why he would be using them. And so we have this question here, so why rush the change? And so it's this way of Morricone, after, beginning in quite a angry, frustrated sort of a tone, shifts towards, what's the rush? This sense of concern. He then goes on to speak about his mother in her 80s and so on, and really, tries to get the reader on board with, why does this have to happen, and why are we rushing these people that aren't ready? So again, it brings about this sense of worry, of rising panic, of concern, and also a sense of skepticism that comes in. Why now? Why do we have to do this? And so he moves from this place of concern, and what's really telling with Morricone, even though it's a short piece, is that he goes from flat out saying, look, this says that people like these people don't matter. And so there's this quite, angry way of saying that, she hasn't thought of everyone. And then he goes on to make sure that he works with that anger or that mistrust or that skepticism that they might be feeling towards Hayley Astaire, to then point out this fact that, who really benefits? It's the store. And so he's able to, change his tone again and change his argument, but he's able to do so because he's already got that reader in a sense of mistrust towards Astaire and that sense of questioning as to her true motives. So another thing we talk about when it comes to establishing really good habits with this area of study is being able to find the little quotes, those little micro things that are happening, those 1 or 2 word quotes that are indicative of the bigger arguments that we've just talked about before. And so a couple of examples that we can find here is this idea of the way in which cash is talked about. And we have, rummaging, and you won't need to go rummaging through your bags ever again. We also have this idea that of wads of cash. That are mentioned. And so cash is made to seem like this cumbersome, outdated, physical pain that doesn't need to be there for the reader. And when I say physical pain, I don't mean like it's causing them physical pain. I mean that she makes mention of the fact of calling it wads of cash and rummaging, these very physical acts, because she can counter that against the idea of breeze, whip, and you're gone, all those types of words to talk about cashless transactions, in that she wants one to seem very cumbersome, and this idea of it being needlessly physically there and hard to find and difficult to work with, and wads of cash, this overflowing, painful thing that we have to put up with, as opposed to these other words that we have here, such as simple. This idea of breezing through the checkout. And so take a look through to see any of these other examples of individual words or short phrases that are really indicative of larger arguments that Astaire or Morricone are using, that are, really showing off how they're trying to get the reader to think about some of the bigger issues that exist here. Some other strategies that we can talk about there when we're writing these consistently good analysis pieces is being able to link evidence or group evidence from different parts of the article and how it exists. And so we have this early point where she mentions, as you know, and so there's that connection here in saying you're aware of what's happening because you're in the store and I'm in the store. And so she moves from that to then talking about the fact that it's more than just a community. We're talking about Australians have embraced the digital economy. And so what Esther is really doing there is that she's able to group together this idea of, look, I understand you and your habits as a local, but we need to be thinking about ourselves as part of a bigger country and these types of things. And so a couple of other strategies that we're going to talk about when we're talking about making sure that we're writing these consistently good pieces is this idea of making sure that we're not just technique hunting, that we're going beyond that. And so there are examples of rhetorical questions throughout this piece, but we want to ask why they exist. And of course, there's also plenty of inclusive language. We have on the second page this idea of we know that the other less customer-centered shops, we understand, and this idea of we and you is used so often. And I want you to challenge yourself when you're looking through this piece to really ask yourself how far you can go with that analysis, as opposed to saying she's including someone in the argument or she's speaking directly to the reader, but why is she doing those things? And that sense of we here at Haley's store, we're a part of the community and we're here for you. I want you to instead to really think about the connection between the we and the you and how that is going to be working in order for her to be able to convince the readers that this is for them and this is all about them and that they are actually the focus of it. And really it is Haley and her team that is there for them in a way that they can help their lives, and help them in their daily lives in the way that they go about their shopping. Of course, we also want to be able to talk about the visual. And so we've talked about the strategy of grouping our evidence or taking written words and being able to find them within the visual. And so there's plenty going on here with the visual that we could link to the written arguments. We have that mention of Haley's store being unlike the rest of them, unlike the bigger stores, the less customer-centered stores. And so as we look at that, we clearly have the handshake. We have this idea of a connection to a customer. We can assume that that person is Haley herself. And this idea of when we're talking about a customer connection and being customer-centered, that the manager, the owner of the store is actually out there on the floor, that she is there literally face-to-face with customers. As we look behind her, we can also notice that there are these bespoke products, these products that look like jam jars and so on. They're not known brands. They're not known products that those run-of-the-mill, bigger supermarket stores would have. And so it then again looks like that this is a customer-centered shop, that this is a place that looks different, that is a little bit different, and we have this customer focus with the fact that she is smiling and engaging this customer that's there. And so we need to make sure that we're going further than just describing that, but rather talking about how it complements the written language and how what that is doing overall is presenting the store as unique, as a place where the local customer will feel valued and where they can find things that they wouldn't find at the less customer-focused stores, and that they are lucky and that they are fortunate in this community to have such a person and have such a store. And so therefore all of these feelings and all of these thoughts that come from that visual that can be linked to the written arguments can be used then for the analysis, as opposed to just pointing out what is there in the picture. Of course, we are lucky in this piece in that it is not just the main picture that is used, in that we also have this thing down here where it comes to the error and the out of service. And so I want you to think about not just interpreting what this means, because many students, when it came to analysing this in 2019, talked about the idea that, it says out of service, which says that machines can break down. And so that's an interpretation, definitely, but it's not really an analysis if they didn't go any further to talk about how, what Morricone is really getting across is that whilst Esther might be pointing out the fact that technology and cashless is the way to go, there are still issues, and that the breeze that Haley Esther has talked about can be countered by this idea of the rolls of the receipt paper, stacking up. Of course, the error out of service is also, rather than just pointing pointing it out, the fact that that's what it says and that machines can break down, the feeling that's elicited through that visual being included with his argument is that technology isn't the be-all and end-all. It's not the answer to everything, and that it has its flaws as well. And so therefore it's undermining Haley Astair's argument that cash is the way to go. It needs to be embraced. That electronic payments are the way to go, and that they need to be embraced, and that cash is cumbersome and so on. Morricone is able to point out that there are those issues with technology as well, and it's not this breeze that perhaps it has been depicted as. And so that sums up a few of the things. And I want to point out that we could be here for hours talking about all of the things that exist here, but rather I want to just get you on the right track and perhaps pointing out a few things that you may not have noticed, but also giving you a few strategies along the way. We're now going to move to the third part of our video, where we're going to look at the more subtle arguments, the things that not many people saw. And we're going to look at how we could find the things in this piece that are going to propel us into the very top echelon of marks. And so to close out the video, we're going to take a look at these very top level habits that we want to be engaging in, and some of the things that we can be doing in order to ensure that our analysis is doing everything that it needs to be doing in order to get itself right up there. Of course, this isn't just for a select few students to look at. Rather, it's for everybody, because we should all be striving to be able to look at these arguments in such depth. And so everything that I'm going to mention for these next few minutes is going to be about making sure that we're showing a holistic understanding of argument and how it shifts and how it moves. And on top of that, also ensuring that we can show that we understand the subtleties of language and the nuances of language, and that we understand that these writers have a purpose as opposed to just what they are saying. And so we'll start with that, this idea of there being a purpose for both of these writers. And so when we take a look at Haley Astair, this idea of the better, faster shopping experience is something that's really, really telling, because this idea is that what she is really doing, as opposed to what she is saying, is that she is leading these people towards this experience, and that she is the person who is going to bring it for them and bring it to them. And so therefore she is able to move these people towards it as this leader, instead of rather just saying, look, her contention is that you need to know that we're going cashless. Rather, it's about moving people into the future and leading people to adopting these new ideas. And we're going to mention a couple of subtle things she does later that really reinforce that point. Of course, we also have these ideas of her, being a bit different, and that it's long before the big stores. And so therefore her purpose as well is to assure the reader that she's on their side, that she is for them, that she is an advocate for them. And so therefore, if we think about it in this way, we can move towards an analysis that isn't just pointing out, and then Haley says this, and then Haley says this, but rather pointing out what she is looking to do to the reader, which is to assure them, which is to excite them, which is to guide them towards this new experience, and to have them also feel that they are fortunate to have her and her store in their local community as well. When it comes to Morricone, we can take a look at the manner in which he puts himself forward, and therefore we can see his purpose being that he's there to uncover the truth and to uncover the reality. And so obviously as well, a part of his purpose is that he wants to tell Mrs. Stair exactly what they think about this so-called better shopping experience. And that idea of it being so-called, really outlines his cynicism and his skepticism as well. And so if we are working with that tone, we can talk more about his purpose and what he is trying to do. Of course, he is trying to stir up resentment. So-called better shopping experience. You're telling people like my mother that she doesn't matter. And so I use the phrase stir up, and that's quite conversational. But if we're going to use that in analysis, I'd be moving towards the fact that really Morricone is trying to incite a sense of anger and mistrust, and that he wants to lead to action towards telling Mrs. Stair that they won't stand for this. And so this idea is that he is more than just what he is saying, that the store will benefit and that she hasn't thought of everyone. What he is looking to do is to create a sense of mistrust, that he's trying to anger the readers. He's trying to frustrate them and trying to put himself forward as the person who is going to bring them the reality and the truth towards what is really happening with this situation. And so another habit that we've talked about with the very top pieces is this idea of there being multiple audiences. And when we talk about that, we don't just mean breaking it down to simple demographics, but rather talking about people within the audience. And so most students who look at this piece are able to say, well, okay, the audience is local people because it's a local piece written by the owner of the local store, so therefore it's locals, and I can't do any more than that. We can go further. We can always go further. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out to you here. And so this line here where it says, we understand the concerns of a minority we understand the concerns a minority of our customers may have. And that really subtle nod that Astaire makes there towards the fact that if you are concerned about this, then you're in the minority. And so therefore we can start to break the audience down to people that have already adopted this technology, who are the majority. And so therefore those people are being spoken to in a way where it's like, hey, thanks for being with us. We know that you use your smart ring or your phone, and we're here to do that all the time now so that we can be better for you. But also pointing out to this minority, which of course will include Morricone's mother, and we'll get to that later, but that idea that there are multiple audiences in which we can therefore analyse that and we can get to further impacts rather than just having this bland view that, oh, language equals this feeling and then language equals that feeling. That idea of the word minority can be used where we can point out to the fact that the people who are still using cash and as she says, they're holding on. What if you prefer cash or don't have a mobile phone and all these types of things? There is that subtle little way of her pointing out that you are in the minority and that 80% of Australians are doing this, and the Reserve Bank, Philip Lowe, is saying all of this. So there is that subtle pressure from Hayley Astaire in saying that, look, if you're not up to speed with all of this, you really should be. Of course, she's never going to be that outright rude or confronting towards the reader because that wouldn't get her across to it. But you can pick up on that nuanced, approach there where she does just subtly mention to them, you are in the minority, and I am going to use that word. Of course, she then goes on to talk about the fact that, we're going to give those people time to adjust. But of course, we could put those two things together to get to a really insightful analysis around the point that she outlines to these people that they're in the minority, but she will still support them and that she will be with them. And so we can find those multiple audiences within it. Then when we can go through it, we can also talk about the fact that Morricone, when he brings up that story of, his mother in his 80s, she's on a pension and these types of things, of course, he's going to be speaking directly to others that are in that exact situation. And so rather than us just analysing Morricone's words by saying, okay, the locals will feel this way, we can bring out the fact that when he mentions his mother in his 80s, that it's that relatable experience where others might have that and that they might be feeling those same concerns. Of course, then he talks, uses this word eliminate. And we've talked about being able to find those very specific uses of language, and all of the section C's throughout the year have those really key words that we want to make sure that we're jumping on. And that use of the word eliminate is not so much there because we can say eliminate, leads to these feelings, but rather that connotation of Astaire's approach being quite brutal and heavy-handed and telling these people that they don't matter. And so if we wanted to be more insightful, we could talk about the fact that Morricone discusses the fact that these people don't matter not long after using the word eliminate, which brought with it these connotations of this brutality and this heavy-handedness in Astaire's approach. And that's the way that we can work with multiple audiences and really specific parts of language to talk about the feeling and the atmosphere that is there, and then link that to what it allows them to do later on. And so we want to also be able to show that we have this holistic understanding of argument and approaches taken by the writer by being able to take evidence from different sections of the material. And so I'll point out a couple of ways that you could do this with the 2019 exam section C. With this quote that we've already looked at here, this idea that we're a bit different. Okay, so we have this very early quote of Astaire's that, we're a bit different, and she's pointing herself out in this way. And then later on where she talks about about, we know that other less customer-centered shops will continue to take cash, but we think that they will soon catch up with us. And so there's this idea of being able to link those two things together to discuss the approach that Esther has taken there. That she is making sure that people see her store as being unique, being a leader, and being one that is different from the rest. And as a result of that, especially when she says catch up, she's really saying superior, that it's better. If we want to take that another step further, we can talk about how in the visual we have those bespoke products. And when I say bespoke products, I mean, products that look like they've been individually handcrafted and made. And so I have mentioned that before. Of course, we could also link that in there. But this fact here that where Esther is wearing an apron in the photograph, not the sort of corporate shirts that everyone at the other regular supermarkets are made to wear, but as opposed to that she is there in the apron, which suggests not only that she is this person who is quite down to earth and there for these people, but also that she's a little bit different, that they do things differently. You're going to get this unique shopping experience, and that they feel that they are a leader because of all of these values, long before the big stores and all those types of things. And so another quick example of grouping evidence can come between this idea of most of our customers don't pay for their goods now. And you could link that to that word minority that I mentioned just earlier, in that idea of pointing out to the reader that it is a smaller group that are paying in cash, and that it's a diminishing group, and really they need to catch up. Again, another quote that you could throw in there if you wanted to. If we wanted to take that even further, we could group it here with this idea that a decade ago, nearly 70% of household spending was in cash. Now it's half of that is on small purchases such as a cup of coffee. And so by pointing out that cup of coffee, that idea of, what can be a daily experience for many people, is really reiterating that point that most people don't do that now. A decade ago, yes, maybe it was that case, but things have really changed. And so there are these little hints throughout the piece. And if you can bring them all there together and show that you understand that by all of these, overall what Hayley Esther is doing is pointing out to those people that haven't adjusted yet that it's really time to do so, you can show that holistic understanding of argument. And so just to wrap that up, we're talking about the most don't pay cash for now, that those that will need help with this are in the minority, and that it was a decade ago, but now things are changing. We can put all three of those things together to talk about Esther's approach towards having these people see that they need to catch up, and that that the supermarket is the one who is going to be able to help them do that. And so when we take a look at how we want to get more insight out of this piece, we want to think about how the majority of people that read this piece the first time, how they will see it, and then challenge ourselves to think, but what else is going on there? And so an example of this would be that on the surface, this is a piece that has been written in order to say there's a change coming and I want you to be aware of it. But as with all the things that we've just mentioned, if we really look at it closely, what Esther is really saying, on top of all of the nice things about there's a change coming, we want you to be aware, we're doing it for you, we're here for you, and all those types of things, essentially, really what she's saying is that the onus is on you to catch up with us, and that we are going to be a leader, and we're always going to be doing the right things, and that we're always going to be doing things the way the trends are heading, and that you really need to catch up with this. Of course, that's just one example, but I want you to think about any other thing that you've seen here where you think, okay, on the surface it sits, but really what's going on is whatever it might be. And so another strategy that I talk about in the 8 habits of the very best argument analysis pieces is this idea of from here to there, from A to B, how a writer will take a reader to a certain point only to get them to another point by being able to get them to there in the first place. And so one way that we can do this with Morricone's piece is taking a look at up here where he says, so why rush this change before so many of us are ready? Up the top here of this paragraph. And what's really telling is that this question appears before he goes on to talk about his mother in her 80s. And even though it's all together, so we're not grouping evidence from different parts, you could break that down further to talk about the fact that Morricone uses that question and brings up the idea of rush as a way of eliciting a sense of concern or that things are perhaps out of control. And then immediately after that, he follows that feeling with an anecdote about his vulnerable mother as a way of capitalizing on that feeling that he's created. And so we can go further with our analysis to talk about the use of that question followed by, immediately followed by the anecdote about his vulnerable mother, takes a reader from this feeling of concern that they may have toward about this being a rush and out of control, to then seeing the real world impacts that it will have on those people that can't catch up on this rush. And so many students will have picked up on the whole technique that Morricone has used in talking about his mother's experience. But if you can be talking about the question that's used immediately beforehand, the mood that that creates, the atmosphere that that creates, and then what that allows him to do when, bringing up the anecdote about his mother, it's your way of making your analysis stand out, and also your way of being much more insightful with how it goes on there. Of course, he goes even further from that by having the readers in that sense of concern and empathy and sympathy for, others that they may know, and feeling about whether they, matter and all those types of things. And once he's got them to that point, he's able to twist the knife further by pointing out, all the negatives that about, who really benefits from this. And so the feeling that he elicits is taking it from this sense of care and sympathy and concern and wondering about whether everything has been thought out and well planned, to then outlining the ulterior motive that's really going on there as a way of building on that sympathy to then say, hey, here's the truth of the situation, and that's why she doesn't care about these people, because really she's making this decision for herself. And so whilst I'm sure that many students would have been able to pick up on all of those different elements, the ability to analyse them in a way where we are discussing how Morricone moves the reader to one point so he can then do this to them, and now that he's got them to there, he can then do this, and that there is a culmination of arguments, and that there is a culmination of feelings, and that there's this cumulative effect of these arguments layering upon each other to bring about these enhanced effects. That is the way in which we can have more insight when it comes to our piece and the way in which we go about it. And so in wrapping up this section about, the very top pieces and what we're looking for, you'll notice that a lot of it is about the holistic understanding of the argument, not just looking at a piece as, right, I've got to pick out language, in this way where I just look through each of the articles and find things, and also that we're really looking at the underlying purpose. And so something that I think the really good pieces do as a matter of habit that you should be looking to do is to start to look at the verbs that are used throughout the piece and the manner in which they are used. And so off the top of my head, a few that I wrote down with the idea when it came to verbs that Esther is looking to assure her reader. She really is looking to say to them, look, we're here for you. We'll help you. If you're not ready for the change, we'll help you, but all of this is there for you. She looks to excite them. Welcome to the 21st century. Breeze, click, and you're done. All of these things. It's exciting. It's happening. It's there for them and they should be grateful. And she also aims to support them. And so there's these verbs where we can talk about the fact that, Esther aims to support her reader. She looks to excite. She looks to assure the reader. Of course, when it comes to Morricone, there's also plenty of verbs we can use for him. He looks to generate protest. When he says, tell Ms. Esther exactly what you think of this. He looks to incite skepticism, and he looks to uncover the reality. And so if you think about those terms that we've just used, and if you think about an analysis piece that is using those types of terms to begin its introduction of its understanding of argument, that he looks to generate protest, to incite skepticism, as opposed to someone who's saying Morricone is saying that this change shouldn't happen, you're going to be leading yourself towards finding that those analysis pieces using those verbs are of that higher quality. And so that wraps up today's video. I hope that you've got a lot out of it. As I mentioned before, there's a lot going on and there's so much that we can highlight, and there's so much more that I'm sure I haven't mentioned. I'd be really interested to hear some other approaches and other things that you saw in this article that perhaps I didn't mention in this video. I'd really like you to make sure you ask any questions down there in the comments. If this is the first English Lab video that you've seen, we've got a range of others across all the areas of study getting you ready for the VCE English exam. If you click on like for this video, and if you can subscribe to our channel, that helps us get the word out there, and you can be notified about extra videos. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, help us get the word out there. We really appreciate the support. We hope that these videos have been really helpful for you. Ask lots of questions if you've got some down there in the comments, and all the best with your studies.